We end here tonight with a voyage to the bottom of the sea. Mark Phillips joined the crew searching for a legendary U.S. warship.
The USS Yorktown, CV-10, was a renowned aircraft carrier that served with distinction during World War II and the Vietnam War.
The expedition of a World War II shipwreck has uncovered surprising new finds.
Really cool stuff. Using a remote rover, NOAA explorers discovered an unexplored section of the USS Yorktown, an aircraft carrier that sank back in 1942.
2.5 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, hidden in freezing darkness and under thousands of pounds of pressure, lies a ghost from World War II, the USS Yorktown. Once a proud and powerful aircraft carrier, the Yorktown now rests silently at the bottom of the sea, a shattered steel monument to one of history's most important battles. For decades, it remained undisturbed, a secret kept by the ocean itself. But when a team of deep-sea explorers recently returned to examine the wreck, they discovered something that left them completely stunned. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a plane, it wasn't even a forgotten piece of the ship's machinery. It was a car, yes, a car, inside an aircraft carrier. At first, the divers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The footage from their remotely operated vehicle was grainy, and the visibility was poor. But then through the murky water and piles of debris, something strange began to appear. A familiar shape, round tires, the curve of a fender, the hint of a grille. "That's a car," someone said in disbelief. Others weren't sure. Maybe it was a military jeep, a utility vehicle, but no, the more they looked, the clearer it became. It wasn't a jeep, it wasn't a tank, it was a civilian car sitting in the middle of a ship designed for aircraft, torpedoes, and war. The obvious question hit everyone immediately. How did it get there? To understand that mystery, we have to go back in time. The USS Yorktown, known as CV-5, was launched in 1936 and quickly became one of the Navy's most important ships. At nearly 800 feet long, it was a floating city capable of carrying dozens of planes, a full crew, and all the equipment needed to fight a war. When the United States entered World War II, the Yorktown saw action almost immediately. It played a key role in the Battle of the Coral Sea, and just weeks later in the Battle of Midway. Midway was the turning point in the Pacific. The battle was brutal, and the Yorktown was right in the middle of it. During the fight, Japanese torpedoes struck the ship, causing massive damage. Fires erupted, power failed. The crew tried desperately to save her, but it was no use. The once mighty carrier sank slowly into the deep, taking with it 141 lives and countless secrets. For over 50 years, the wreck of the Yorktown remained lost. Then in 1998, the legendary oceanographer Robert Ballard, the same man who discovered the Titanic, sent remote cameras deep into the Pacific. What they found was incredible. The ship was still upright, sitting on the seafloor like it had been carefully placed there, but most of its compartments remained unexplored. And that changed in 2023 and again in 2025 when new missions were launched to investigate the wreck in more detail. It was during one of these dives that the car was discovered. It was hard to miss. Even after decades underwater, it was still clearly a car, a vintage model with curved lines, steel wheels, and parts of its body still intact. Some believed it was a 1940 Ford Woody. Others thought it might be a super deluxe coupe. Either way, it was not military issue. This was a car built for streets and highways, not war zone. Theories started flying. Was it smuggled aboard, part of a secret mission? Maybe it was captured from the enemy, but none of those ideas made much sense. The car wasn't damaged in any strange way. It wasn't hidden, and it definitely wasn't Japanese. So why was it there? The real answer, it turns out, might be much more down to earth. In the 1930s and early 1940s, it wasn't all that unusual for senior naval officers like captains and admirals to bring personal vehicles aboard large ships when they were assigned overseas. It sounds strange today, but back then it was a practical solution. These officers needed a way to get around quickly when the ship was docked in port. Whether it was for meetings, errands, or shore leave, having a car was just as convenient. So they brought one with them, packed it below decks along with the spare parts, tools, and crates of supply. The Yorktown's car was likely one of those, a personal vehicle belonging to someone very high up, maybe even Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher or Captain Elliot Buckmaster. It would have been loaded aboard early in the voyage and stored deep within the ship, out of sight and out of mind. But here's where the mystery deepens. When the Yorktown was attacked at Midway and began to sink, the crew took drastic measures to keep her afloat. They dumped weight, airplanes, guns, anything they could overboard to lighten the load. So why didn't they get rid of the car? Was it forgotten in the chaos? Was it trapped behind wreckage and impossible to reach? Or did the crew simply think they didn't have time to move it? No one knows for sure. All we know is that when the ship went down, the car went with it. And today, the vehicle still rests on its tires inside the torn hull of the Yorktown. Rust covers its frame, parts of the roof have caved in, sea life clings to every surface, but the shape is unmistakable. A relic of everyday life sealed inside the wreck of a warship. It's not just a piece of metal, it's a symbol, a quiet reminder that even in the middle of war, some people tried to hold on to a sense of normalcy. That someone somewhere once looked at that car not as a historical artifact, but as their way to get to the dock or the store or a friend's house. Now it's a ghost locked away in one of the ocean's most mysterious graveyards. But the car wasn't the only strange thing waiting inside the wreck. After the shocking discovery of a civilian car deep inside the USS Yorktown, the dive team's curiosity reached a boiling point. That car had already turned everything they thought they knew about the wreck on its head. But the mystery was far from over. The ship was massive, over 800 feet long, and much of it still hadn't been fully explored. With new underwater technology and robotic cameras guiding the way, the team pushed deeper into the steel skeleton of a ship frozen in time. And what they found next didn't just raise eyebrows, it gave scientists chills. Their remote-controlled vehicle drifted carefully through the ship's hangar deck, where Navy aircraft were once stored in service. The space was partially collapsed, twisted beams crisscrossing the floor like the ribs of a sunken body. Panels and support struts dangled from above, swaying slightly in the ocean currents. The silence was total, the only sound being the occasional mechanical whir from the ROV's thrusters. Then the cameras picked up something strange, something with curved lines and familiar shape. There, buried beneath broken equipment and debris, was the unmistakable outline of an airplane. Not just a scattered engine or a wing. This was an entire aircraft, mostly intact. As the camera got closer, the identity became clear. A Douglas SBD Dauntless. And this was the dive bomber that helped change the course of the war. At the Battle of Midway, Dauntless planes from the Yorktown and other carriers had managed to sink 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, turning the tide in the Pacific. And now one of those planes was still here. Not in a museum, not in a scrapyard, but resting deep beneath the sea, right where it was abandoned all those years ago. The aircraft was in surprisingly good shape. Its wings were crumpled and dented, but still attached. The tail fin had collapsed slightly and the cockpit glass was shattered, yet the body remained mostly intact, and beneath it something even more shocking. A bomb still strapped to the undercarriage. This wasn't just a historical relic, it was an unexploded piece of the past, a live ordnance from World War II resting peacefully in the cold silence of the deep. Scientists stared at the feed in disbelief. This was rare, unbelievably rare. It confirmed that the plane had likely been armed and ready when disaster struck. There hadn't been time to unload it, no chance to launch it. The attack had come fast, and this plane, like many others, had been left behind. As the team continued their sweep of the hangar, they found even more aircraft, some barely recognizable, others remarkably preserved. One appeared to be a Grumman F-4F Wildcat, its wings folded back as if still waiting for orders to take off. Another was smashed nearly flat under layers of metal and debris, but the tail section gave it away. It too was a Dauntless, a once proud machine now reduced to a skeleton. Then came something completely unexpected. Painted high on the wall inside one of the elevator shafts was a mural, not graffiti. Not a technical diagram, a hand-painted world map, and not just any map. It showed the path of the USS Yorktown, marked with colorful lines and tiny symbols, tracking her journeys across the ocean. The title at the top read, "A Chart of the Cruises of the USS Yorktown." Even after decades underwater, much of the paint was still visible. Red lines traced the ship's path across the Atlantic. Blue arcs showed its journey through the Pacific. Little icons marked key battles, ports, and stops. There were palm trees near the South Pacific, tiny icebergs off the coast of Alaska. Someone had poured hours into this, maybe during a long deployment, using whatever paint they could find. It was both artwork and history, and somehow it had survived the war, the sinking, and 80 years underwater. Everyone watching the live feed fell silent. It was more than a decoration, it was a story, a personal record made by someone who had been there, who had seen it all firsthand. The mural mural wasn't listed on any blueprint. No photograph of it existed in naval archives. Without this dive, it might have stayed hidden forever. Elsewhere in the wreck, the team found lockers still standing in rows. Most were open, their contents long gone. But one locker remained sealed, perfectly closed, untouched by time. No one dared open it. It would have to stay that way, protected under international law. But it begged the question, what was inside? A uniform, letters from home, a photo, some fragment of a sailor's life frozen in that dark metal box? Scattered across the mess hall were more reminders of everyday life. A meal tray still rested on one of the long tables, its surface covered in a thick layer of silt. A spoon lay beside it as if someone had placed it down and walked away, never to return. The team even found a dented fire extinguisher mounted to a warped wall, its label still barely legible. And then there were the boots. Just outside one of the bulkhead doors, resting side by side on the floor, sat a pair of leather boots. Covered in silt, algae, and rust, they still looked like someone had just stepped out of them. Were they abandoned in a rush? Was their owner nearby when the torpedo struck? Had they made it off the ship? No one could say, but the sight of those boots, still upright, still facing the door, made everyone stop and stare. Each of these discoveries told a different part of the Yorktown story. The planes showed how fast the battle unfolded. The mural revealed a crew proud of their ship's journey. The boots and tray were reminders that this wasn't just a war machine, it had been home, a place where sailors ate, worked, joked, worried, and fought, all of it sealed away in this underwater crypt. And then there was the car again. And as the ROV circled back through the wreck, it passed the civilian vehicle once more, sitting on all four tires, perfectly still, covered in rust, but still holding its shape. Some believe it was a 1940 Ford Woody. Others think it might have been a Super Deluxe. The details are too worn to be certain, but one thing is clear. It did not belong on an aircraft carrier. Yet somehow, here it was. A ghostly, out-of-place artifact reminding everyone that war doesn't erase the human side of a ship's story. Experts now agree it was likely brought aboard by a high-ranking officer, stowed deep in the cargo bay to be used in port. That alone is strange enough, but the fact that it survived the attack, the sinking, and the crushing pressure of the deep ocean without being destroyed, it borders on unbelievable. What started as a routine expedition to document a historic wreck had turned into something far more haunting. The Yorktown wasn't just a ship, it was a time capsule, and it wasn't finished giving up its secrets, because as the team prepared to end their dive, they spotted one last thing. Just beyond the collapsed wing of a Dauntless deep in the shadows, something caught the camera's light. It was small, partially buried, but unmistakable, and it would change everything they thought they knew about the Yorktown's final hours. Just when the team thought the mysteries of the USS Yorktown had been uncovered, just when they believed the car, the aircraft, the mural, and the sealed locker were the final surprises, something else appeared. It was small, easy to miss, barely visible through the silty shadows near the wreckage of a collapsed Dauntless. But as the robotic camera hovered closer, a strange shape emerged. It wasn't part of a plane, it wasn't a tool, it was round, metallic, and marked with engraved letters. It was the ship's bell. The bell of a warship is more than just a functional object. It's a symbol of identity and honor, engraved with the vessel's name. It rings during ceremonies, during watches, and when sailors are laid to rest. Many naval bells are saved before a ship sinks, but in the chaos of Midway, the Yorktown's bell was lost. No one had seen it since 1942. Now there it was, lying on its side, half buried in a bed of sand and rusted fragments. The words USS Yorktown CV-5 were still visible along the rim. The team had been searching for this bell for decades, and finally here it was, silent, untouched, a beacon of the ship's forgotten soul. Finding the bell brought an unexpected wave of emotion. It was as if the Yorktown herself had spoken. After all the violence and panic of her final hours, after 80 years at the bottom of the sea, she still had something to say. But the dive wasn't over yet. The final sweep of the wreck brought the team to a section of the ship they hadn't reached before. This part had been completely collapsed, a tangled mess of beams and panels, but recent shifts in the seafloor had made it accessible. What they found there was strange. Objects that didn't belong, a broken briefcase, a rusted typewriter, a torn officer's cap pinned under a piece of bent steel, and then another shock. Paper. Actual paper. It's rare for paper to survive underwater, especially for decades, but under certain conditions, cold, darkness, and complete stillness, it's possible. In a sealed drawer now exposed to the open sea, divers found what looked like waterlogged documents, fragile, stained, but still whole. The team didn't dare remove them. They photographed them instead, capturing every letter, every watermark. Later analysis revealed what they had found: command orders, typed instructions signed by a senior officer detailing battle strategies and readiness protocols from days before the Battle of Midway. These weren't just scraps, they were first-hand records of the Yorktown's last mission, preserved in the deep like a forgotten diary. And one of the orders even mentioned a personal detail, a request to secure non-military items in the lower cargo deck, including officer vehicle. It wasn't much, just a line in a longer list, but it confirmed what many had suspected. The car discovered deep in the wreck was there on purpose, officially logged, transported with the full knowledge of command, a strange final thread tied back to a man who likely never saw the car again. And that wasn't all. In another compartment, the camera spotted a piece of equipment that looked out of place, a box with strange markings. It turned out to be a camera, an early military-grade motion picture camera, the kind used to film combat footage or daily life aboard ship. No one knows what it captured, whether it held film or if the film had survived. But the presence of that camera raised new possibilities. Could someone on board have documented the days leading up to the Yorktown's final battle? Could that footage, if ever recovered, give us a moving picture of history we thought was lost? The wreck is now protected and nothing can be removed without official approval, but the potential is there. More than any textbook or photo, a camera like that could show the world exactly what life aboard the Yorktown was like before the torpedoes hit, before the ship fell silent. Each discovery built on the last. The car that had once seemed like a random anomaly now fit into a larger picture, a story of human lives, routines, pride, and chaos. The mural showed where the crew had gone. The bell reminded us of who they were. The aircraft spoke to the urgency of battle. The sealed locker whispered about personal moments frozen in time, and then there was the silence. It's that heavy oceanic silence that blankets every wreck in the deep. It doesn't just mute sound, it amplifies imagination. It makes you wonder what else is still down there. What stories are still locked behind rusted doors and under collapsed decks? What pieces of the past are still waiting to be found? Because that's the strange thing about shipwrecks. They're more than just metal and rivets. They're full of emotion. You can feel it when you look at them, especially a wreck like the Yorktown, which didn't just sink, it fought. It stayed afloat long after it should have gone under. Its crew fought fire with bare hand. They tried to save it, and when they couldn't, they left behind everything. Some of them never came back. Today, the USS Yorktown sits in silence. Her decks are warped and broken, her compartments are dark and twisted, but she is not forgotten. She is a museum beneath the sea, a grave, a mystery, a storybook written in rust and shadow. And with each new dive, each discovery, that story grows. A car on a warship, a mural on a wall, a bell in the sand, and documents, boots, trays, and memories scattered across the floor. These are the details that make history feel alive. And now it's your turn to carry the story forward. Like, if you found this journey as fascinating as we did, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves history. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a deep dive into the world's most mind-blowing mysteries. Because somewhere out there in the darkness of the deep, another secret is waiting to be found. And when it is, you'll hear it here first.